in a world that's telling young people that what matters, especially through social media and advertising and so many misleading messages, that what matters is how you look, what matters is how much money you have, or even what matters is how perfect your grades are. Acknowledging a young person for their character, those internal qualities that are ultimately what matters most, actually is helping to reprogram their mind about what really matters. I think we have an epidemic of perfectionism, an epidemic of kids who want to be famous. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be famous, but for what purpose? Do you want to be famous so that you impact more people? So this idea of character, like you're talking about, I think is one of the most missed aspects of gratitude for especially acknowledging and complimenting youth.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. We are so grateful you are choosing your precious time and sharing some of that with us today. Today, we have an amazing guest, Julie Carrier, who is an inspirer of young women, helping them become leaders in the world. She's the founder of Girls Lead and the author of books and much, much more. And so welcome to the conversation, Julie.
Thank you so much, Randy. And I'm so excited to be here and to promote your gratitude movement.
Well, that means a lot because I believe, and I say it all the time, that gratitude doesn't just change lives, but it actually saves them. And I'd love to hear along this conversation how you've experienced that in your life. But maybe to start, could you share with us a little bit about your journey from you weren't always a leader, maybe you were a shy teenager one day, but how did you become a leader and an inspirer of young women in your life? What was the journey behind that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was younger, I had crippling anxiety and self-doubt. I struggled with basically being really short and almost looking like I was in elementary school, even though I was in high school, had a high squeaky voice. In fact, I couldn't even raise my hand in class to speak. And in fact, I was that scared about making a mistake, hyper perfectionist. And it wasn't necessarily just one moment, but it was a series of moments that helped me really focus on the fact that it's not just I aspired to be a leader, but in fact, I already was a leader. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about how to help young people. A speaker actually came to our school. And this is one of the things that I emphasize a lot. You never know how one message in just one moment can change somebody's life. And on this particular day, the speaker came into our gymnasium and was wearing a tuxedo. And I remember thinking, a speaker in a tuxedo, and he literally walked to the center of the gym floor and he said, "I'm wearing my best because you deserve the best."
Wow.
He said, "You deserve to live the best life. You deserve to make the best choices." And he went on to talk about that life's not just what happens to you, it's how you choose to respond, and that you are the leader of your own life. And it was really the first time I had ever heard the idea that I was a leader. And in fact, I was a leader because I was the one responsible for making choices to live the life I wanted to lead. And that mindset shift really changed a lot for me. I went from being a student that kind of just let life happen to then being a student that proactively made things happen. And it just really sparked from there.
Hey there, everyone. Did you know that beyond hosting the Sparks of Gratitude podcast, I am also an estate planning attorney, and I love gratitude, and my law firm is proud to sponsor this video. Since 2010, in my law practice, I have designed and delivered customized peace of mind with sophisticated estate planning made easy. So whether you need foundational estate planning, including revocable trusts, wills, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives, which is what most people need, or you might need advanced strategies such as irrevocable trust for asset protection or advanced estate tax planning, I am here to guide you every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, your peace of mind is my peace of mind. You can visit randallsparks.com and I can get started helping you plan for the future today. Now back to our podcast. Wow. And so was that like an instant spark or did this kind of take a little ramp up of feeling some of that confidence of how do you implement that in your young life?
It's a great question. I look back and I remember literally, even though I had had this aha moment, I was still too nervous to even say hi to this amazing speaker. I remember looking through the doors of the gym back at this gentleman and seeing all of the students surrounding him. And I do remember thinking to myself, someday I want to be able to impact the lives of other kids the same way that one person impacted mine. And I think that's where the seed was planted. What's interesting, because of the mindset shift, it didn't just transform everything immediately, but there were some pretty dramatic things that happened. I ended up starting my own business and hiring my friends, making jewelry that we sold at local craft shows. I ended up turning into a globally recognized bead artist at 16 and ran for National Honor Society president and student council. All these things sparked from one thing and then leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. But it started with that mindset shift that, oh, I'm a leader, even though I might be 14 and have kids picking on me and feel awkward and nervous. I still am responsible for leading my life. And so that's the same message that I try to share with young people. You're not a leader of the future. In fact, you are a leader right now. And that's because your choices matter to you and all of those around you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have any idea or even remember who this speaker was?
Yes, his name was Harvey Alston. And a funny story, I actually got to share this recently. I didn't know who the speaker was. I just knew it was the speaker in the tuxedo. And years later, fast forward 20 years, I've been speaking all across the country to audiences large and small. And I was basically a top female leadership speaker in the youth space. And I was asked by a speakers bureau to represent me. They said, "Hey, we hear you're one of the top, female speakers. We'd love for you to join our speaker team that we represent." And so I did my due diligence. I was researching them because I really care about being represented appropriately. And I remember looking at the website at all their speakers and looking at the photos. And then I saw the gentleman in a tuxedo, a photo of him. I literally started crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, there he is after all these years. And I was able to find his email address and send him like a 10-page email talking about how he had changed my whole life and how many kids I've been blessed to reach. And he emailed me back the next day and he said, "You wait your whole life for a letter like this." And he said, "I have tears in my eyes as I write this." And then the full circle moment later, after we met and we got to connect, he invited me to speak at his youth leadership conference. So that little 14-year-old girl who was inspired by him 20 years ago actually got to speak on his stage and honor him in front of all of those young people. So
Wow.
it's you never know what that one person, that one message that's gonna ripple out and impact so many, and that's what happened with us.
That is so amazing. I'm so happy that you had the chance to come full circle with that. And I imagine, and because you've spoken with and have guided and coached so many teenage girls in your career and your mission in doing this, have you had moments like that where some have come to you and you've seen what's come from your influence?
It is humbling. I talk about, and this, we all have a purpose, and part of our purpose is to live our profession in a way that honors that purpose. And for me, my purpose is to help others recognize their inherent worth and worthiness to lead their best life. And I know that sounds like a lot of words, but I do think when really human beings know how valuable they are, that they are here for a reason, that this isn't just about life happening to you, that you have a responsibility to live and lead your best life that you have on this earth. It's a really exciting moment. And a lot of young people hear that message, and just like it was for me, sometimes it's the first time they hear it. So it does have ripple effects. I have my special reminder boxes, those days where work feels hard and I'm on the road and I'm exhausted. I remember that big box of letters and photos and messages that I get from young people saying how that one message at that one moment impacted their own life.
Wow, that seems powerful. So do you sometimes dig into that box of reminders, or just knowing that it exists is sometimes that enough?
Yeah. The thing is knowing that it exists, and then also I don't do it very often, but it is a big box, and I will just occasionally have the opportunity to put something new in or take some things out, and it reminds me of the event or the young person, and it's just an affirmation of, hey, it's you don't do it for the gratitude, but you do it for the impact. And here's an example of a lot of the impacts you're having.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I'm gonna use that, just the box, the symbol that has of the impact that you're making.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the impact you've made even extends far beyond what you know. I mean, isn't that what's beautiful when new ones come and you realize like what people have impact? And this is what I really wanted to know if you met the man in the tuxedo, because you never know what one small moment in life can turn into. And so
Mhm.
taking the chance, saying that thing, reaching out, it's so this is where I believe that gratitude and kindness changes and saves people's lives. It did that to yours. Somebody
Mhm.
showed you that you are a leader, and establishing
Mhm.
that belief in you is just so amazing. I love that. Well,
And then to
go
your
ahead.
point of finding him and expressing that gratitude, it's interesting because he's impacted, I'm sure, thousands and thousands of lives. And I think I would encourage anyone who's listening or watching today to think about what is that mentor, maybe from when you were younger that changed your life, or even someone recently. A lot of times we think, oh, well, they already know that I'm grateful, or they already know that they changed my life. They're not really interested. No, gratitude is so powerful. There is a significant chance that they actually have no idea the depth of the impact it might have had on your life. And that small shout out of gratitude could mean the world to them.
Yeah, I echo that invitation is it takes you only a moment to express that specific and sincere gratitude and appreciation to somebody who's impacted you. Just I mean,
Mhm.
right now, send that text. Push pause on this podcast and send that text message. And if somebody responds, tell us about it. I wanna know what they said. Put that comment on it because I know that somebody's life can be changed and impacted from that. So,
Mhm.
um, that is one person who had a major impact in your life, but you've worked with so many people over the years, from whether that's from family and friends all the way through big institutions and Harvard and the Pentagon and so on and TV, and you've been all over the place. So, what have been some of the pivotal moments since that man in the tuxedo that
Mhm.
you're grateful for that have changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, what great questions. It's a fun trip to reflect back on how you got where you are now. I think when I think back, it's interesting, even though I had that aha and that realization that, someday I want to be able to impact the lives of other kids the same way that one person impacted mine. I that kind of it stuck with me, but it kind of ended there. School is about a lot of times reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I went through and I got my good grades, and then I got to college and I had no idea what to do with my life. I didn't really think about, well, speaking, is that really a profession? I probably should get a regular job. And I did like animals, and I had a lot of wonderful family members saying, you should be a vet. You'll be a great vet. So I didn't know any better, and I was a people pleaser, and so I thought, well, yeah, I'll be a vet. That'll be great. Yeah, I'll help animals, and again, that's a wonderful profession. I wasn't particularly called to that, and when I was going through the motions, pre-vet med, all these really intense classes, I was getting good grades, and I thought, well, maybe that means I'm supposed to be a vet because I'm good at it, right? I'm good at it, but something felt missing, and I remember I got a scholarship to go to England, and my family didn't have a lot of money, so it was a big deal. It was my first time out of the country, and I was studying pre-vet med in England at their university, and I had a moment where it was before Christmas, and I was sitting with a huge stack of biology books, and I was cramming for these huge, really very challenging exams. And I remember thinking, I'm here on a full scholarship. I'm here with the opportunity of a lifetime working on this veterinary medicine goal I have, but I am so miserable. I thought, why am I so miserable? And sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to really check in on how we're feeling. No, there's moods. We might have an off day, but just something was not feeling right. And so for me, I'm a person of faith, and I prayed about it. And I was like, God, please just give me some guidance here because this isn't measuring up. And I felt like almost like this inner coach, this nudge that was like, what's a job that you love so much you'd do it for free? And maybe you could get paid for it. And it was so funny because as I heard that internal question in my mind, I thought, you know what? I cannot believe it. It took me until this exact moment. I already knew the answer to that question. I'd had the answer almost every single day of my college career, particularly over the summers, when in fact, and I don't advise this if there's any parents listening or young people, I don't advise this as a strategy. I actually lived on credit card debt over the summers of my college experience so that I could volunteer at youth leadership camps and conferences. In fact, I loved leadership so much. I was going into debt in order to be able to volunteer my time because I was so passionate about it. And I thought, I love this so much. What am I doing studying pre-vet med when I could be studying leadership? When I could be speaking potentially to girls like I was when I was in high school having a tough time. So it was interesting because we do have aha moments and those are meaningful, we've got to follow them up with ongoing reflection and ongoing opportunities to think about, where are we going? What's our why? What am I grateful for? And so when I thought about all those moments with those kids at the conferences, my heart was filled with gratitude. And I thought, that's what I'm meant to do. So I made a rather radical choice to quit my pre-med program. This was my senior year of college at that point. Went back and basically worked with 3 amazing professors to create a new degree program. It didn't exist at the time. This was about 20 years ago. So we actually created the first ever degree program in leadership studies at my university. It was a personalized study program. It finally got approved. I did have to go to school another few years to graduate, but it was worth it because I ended up getting a degree in something I loved, and that's what helped to launch my career.
That creating something that's meaningful and having the courage to do that, it seems obvious to me now that you are an inspirer of leaders because it meant so much to you. Now, I have an interesting question about that. I don't know if this is off, but you tell me. Because you were doing that and going into debt to do that during your summers, just because it was so meaningful to you, did you
Mhm.
happen to have, and this is me projecting my own feelings, right? Did you have any resistance to monetizing something that was so meaningful to you that you were doing it for less than free? That to turn this
Mhm.
into a
Yeah.
new, to say, well, now I'm going to earn money from this thing that I was doing for free.
I actually didn't even think about it that way. I thought, how can I do something that I love and be able to provide for myself so that I can pay my bills and be able to, afford to live my life, right? So I don't think I had any issues because I realized that if I were able to find a way to get compensated for doing what I love, I could do more of what I loved, right? So I think it helped me move this vision of, I want to do leadership, helped me realize. And when I worked for those organizations, they had people there who were basically running the organization. They deserved to be compensated. So I didn't have an issue with that at all. I think we're meant to be compensated for the great work that we do, and volunteer work is great. I didn't even realize or even think about the fact that it could be a profession. I'd never. Again, it sounds so obvious, but what's so interesting is I think so many people, myself included, are living our life where there's so many clues about maybe our purpose or our passion or what we're called to do in those things we're most grateful for, but we don't have the conscious opportunity to reflect on those things, and so they pass us by when they're all around us. So that's why I share that story, is because I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, does a purpose really exist? It absolutely does. It doesn't have to be a profession. It can be expressed through volunteer work or through parenthood or through service in a school. But I do think that life has clues everywhere about what we can do that we're going to be most fulfilled by.
Oh, interesting. Life has clues everywhere if we're able to see them. So, could you tell us a little bit about Girls Lead, because you developed this, and I'm sure these are the lessons that you're teaching these girls, that you're inspiring them with, is that there are clues everywhere and for how to see them. At least I'm
Mhm.
assuming you do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think what's interesting. So I ended up. This is how life has a funny trajectory. Sometimes a sense of humor. So I got my degree in leadership studies, focused on essentially leader identity, psychology, a lot of key elements that are not just about um, leadership as a position of power or a position of authority. That leadership is leading from your character and your core values, and that's where you have the most impact and influence and strength. So with that as like the foundation, I was all prepared to go work with youth. And then I had the opportunity, while I was volunteering at a leadership conference, to meet someone who had just gotten a big contract from the Pentagon and was really marveling at the fact that I had a degree in leadership studies, because at the time it, again, was very unusual. And so I got hired at the Pentagon at the age of 23 to develop innovative leadership development curriculum for executives. And while I was there, I kept thinking, why aren't we just saving, these amazing types of learning experiences for adults? Why don't we make the same really high level corporate leadership development and training experiences available for young people? And so fast forward, I ended up much to many people's dismay, they thought I was crazy leaving my high-powered corporate job at the Pentagon to start my own youth leadership consulting firm, speaking firm, writing books. And what I realized is that while I was speaking at a lot of these amazing leadership conferences like Future Business Leaders of America and DECA, really large events, I was one of the only females, if not the only female speaker. And I think that's not an issue now. We have a lot more of us out there right now, which is a good thing. I think all young people deserve to see themselves represented. But why I bring this up is that a lot of those events at the time, over 50% of the participants were young women. And I was one of the only female speakers they've seen. So a lot of the girls had specific questions about how you deal with peer pressure, how you deal with self-doubt. And so I started saying, hey, I'll come speak at your big conference for 5,000 or 10,000 students. But how about after I'll hold a special breakout for young women where we can talk about some of the struggles that they're up against in an environment where they feel comfortable sharing. And so what we started finding is these special breakout sessions would have standing room only. Girls would be literally waiting outside the doors trying to get in because they were so hungry for content and messaging and information to support them on their leadership journey. And so that's how this idea, this whole movement got started. I still do support young men and young women, of course. I think all young people can benefit from learning about leadership. I am especially noted for the work I do for girls because I do feel for a long time that was a part of our population that needed a lot more support and still do actually in this area.
Well, and how do people engage with these organizations in the coaching and participate in what it is that you provide?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, thank you. So, a couple of ways that groups or organizations or even people will ask me to support them. As a keynote speaker, I do really interactive experiences. We don't call them keynotes, but it's essentially interactive keynote experiences where we bring in coaching. Students get to coach each other. We do goal setting exercises. It's a lot of fun. I love that. The other way that folks will work with me is a lot of times through the curriculum that I offer. So I can't take personal credit. This has been a team effort. We thought, why are we just saving leadership for after school or for select experiences when there's so many young people that would never see themselves as a leader and may never go to a leadership conference? So we thought, what would it look like if we bring leadership development to the academic school day? So rather than school just being math, science, and English, school is math, science, English, grit, growth mindsets, goal setting, all those amazing personal development experiences that you and I really seek out, actually bringing those to make it a core part of the academic experience. And so that was a labor of love. We're now in our seventh year. We have a global model leadership school. It's award-winning. It's got a longitudinal study that's showing extraordinary outcomes. So one, I like to serve the young people directly because that's my heart. And two, we're now serving young people through serving schools and the in-school faculty that become coaches to teach this content in the classroom.
That's amazing. Well, as you teach all these skills and this content, I'm obviously focused on the importance and impact of gratitude. I believe in it deeply. And so, how does gratitude play a part, or how is that injected or weaved through your engagement with the teens that you coach and influence?
Yeah, you know what? It's so interesting. I believe gratitude, it's something inherent within all of us. I also think it's a learned skill. And I think what I find is adults and young people alike can be really uncomfortable with the feeling of gratitude. And when I say gratitude, it's not just saying, hey, thank you, that was great. It's that deep awareness that this person is making your life better or contributing to your life meaningfully in some way that is moving. And so we actually teach young people how to express gratitude. And also and I'm sure you're very familiar, many of our listeners are as well, there's some very strong negativity bias hardwired in our human brain. And so a lot of people's brains are focused on what's going wrong, what they didn't like. And so actually starting to retrain the brain to focus on strengths. What is something I really value about this person? Looking for one good thing. And so we actually do something in the schools that I support called strengths shout outs, where students actually are given the assignment to look for strengths that they see in their peers during class time. And then they have a designated day of the week in one of our courses where they actually give the strength shout outs to their peer. And it's very structured. And in fact, I'd recommend this for parents as well. Feedback that's not substantiated, brains can reject. So if someone's like, wow, you're the greatest, you're so awesome, that's nice. It might make someone feel good temporarily, but they're like, oh, they're just saying that. What do they really mean? But if you can substantiate gratitude with evidence, like, hey, Emily, I noticed that you really stood up and showed a lot of courage when you spoke about what you cared about with your grandma's situation. And I noticed it also inspired a number of the other students in class. I just wanted to really acknowledge you for that. Like, that's substantiated gratitude. So all gratitude is good, but gratitude backed up by evidence is great. So I have a formula that I teach students and parents that they can use to maximize the impact of their gratitude. Do you think your listeners might be interested in hearing that?
Oh, I would love to hear that.
Okay, well, it's actually very powerful. It is science based. And one of the reasons why it is science based is we add in that evidence piece. So the first step is to recognize what that strength is. That strength could be one of many things. It could be character, it could be communication. It just a strength that is inherent to that person and who they are is always the best kind of strength. So, like a character based strength. So you want to say the strength. So it's called the C method, right? The second part of that acronym is E, an example. You want to, first of all, again, acknowledge the strength. Two, share the example where you saw that strength represented. So, like we said, oh, I noticed when you spoke up and talked about your grandmother. That's the specific example. And then the third one fits right in with your message. That's express gratitude. So, express gratitude for the impact. When a young person knows, or even a person, that they've had impact because of the action that they took, it gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, and it does acknowledge their contribution. So the C method, and call it the I see your strengths method, is a really powerful way to express gratitude, especially for young people, because it reminds them of what matters most.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that because if nothing else in our conversation is it goes live when we publish this, that tool, that process, that model is enough and is worth enough. I think you and I may have talked about it when we spoke a couple of months ago. I learned something similar to that my daughters do in their school, where they call it
Mhm.
character call outs.
I love
And
that.
it is
Yeah.
so beautiful, and this is from preschool age kids all the way up to junior high age kids, and anytime they gather every day, they have this moment when they do character call outs, and so it becomes part of the culture, and the guide or the teachers in the class will say, "Who has character call outs?" when it's the time for that, and the kids are jumping out of their seats because everyone wants to participate. That's what's so amazing about it, is it promotes that because it feels so good, and
It
someone.
does feel good. It feels good to be the recipient. It feels good to be the giver. It's
Mhm.
such a beautiful practice, and it's not about inflating kids' egos. It's about reinforcing character. In a world that's telling young people that what matters, especially through social media and advertising and so many misleading messages, that what matters is how you look, and what matters is how much money you have, or even what matters is how perfect your grades are. Acknowledging a young person for their character, those internal qualities that are ultimately what matters most, actually is helping to reprogram their mind about what really matters. I think we have an epidemic of perfectionism, an epidemic of kids who want to be famous. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be famous, but for what purpose? Do you want to be famous so that you impact more people? So this idea of character, like you're talking about, I think is one of the most missed aspects of gratitude for especially acknowledging and complimenting youth.
Oh, I love that. Well, because that was so valuable, I think I'm gonna dig a little deeper and see what else you can give to us. So, of tools or models or skills like that, what are some other skills that you teach to these youth to help them gain these attributes of leadership or gratitude?
Yeah, I think that we actually teach gratitude. We teach how do you express gratitude. There's an amazing intervention. Intervention is just a fancy word in a lot of research that means exercise. So there's an evidence-based exercise that really anyone can do. It's called the gratitude letter, and you may have already heard about this. Many of our listeners may. If you haven't, it's incredibly powerful. It's where you take just 15 minutes and you think of someone in your life that without them you wouldn't be the person that you are today, and someone who's still with you, that you actually write them a gratitude letter, and you don't just say, hey, thank you, I think you're awesome, but you actually talk about the strengths that this person has, how they've impacted you, a specific story where they may have said or done something that helped to change your life, and that expressing gratitude for the impact that that person had on your life. Then, not just writing a letter and sending it to them, actually going to their house or going out to dinner or going for a meal, reading them that letter word for word and handing it to them. And that has one of the most powerful impacts, not just on the recipient, but also the giver. And I have to actually pull out the study to talk about all of the benefits that come with that. But increases in happiness, I think for one study, it was like an increase in happiness over 6 months from a one time gratitude intervention or gratitude exercise. So the idea that we all can do this, we actually have young people do this in their classroom where they write out a gratitude letter, they give it to somebody in person. And in fact, what I love is some of the coaches for our program will model it for the students by bringing one of their colleagues into the class that they admire and appreciate. Reading the gratitude letter in front of this amazing teacher, giving it to them. There's usually tears involved, appropriate, of course, but it's great for students to get to see, well, this is the power of gratitude. Gratitude is taking a moment and saying, I see you, and I want you to see the impact you've had on my life. And so, we also prep the kids that if you're writing this letter and you're reading it, there's a chance the person may respond awkwardly because sometimes it's very awkward to feel those feelings. So we let them know that not everybody's trained to handle the magnificent, pretty heavy duty emotions of gratitude. So if someone's like, oh, whatever, you just wrote that because you want me to pay you, or, some people have offhanded comments. It doesn't mean they're not appreciative. It just means they don't know how to handle the emotion of gratitude.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I've been on that receiving end. Well, I'll pause there. I had someone else on the podcast who talked about a study that was done at Center for Altruistic Research or something at Stanford, where they studied when somebody is giving a sincere act of gratitude or compassion to someone else, what happens in their brain, and the chemicals and the dose of positive chemicals that come and the long effects that has. But it doesn't just happen in the giver or the receiver, but also if there's an onlooker. And so, as you're describing your students watching someone, the two teachers do that to each other, they get to feel the same thing, even though they're not the participant in it. All of those
Yeah.
chemicals come. It's so amazing that you create that space and that experience for people. Something else, and is that I love the practice of writing the letter of gratitude to my younger self. Have you
Mm.
ever gone through that process of there's an exercise where you can write a letter of gratitude to my younger self from 5 or 20 years ago, and now I'm exposed to the all of the sacrifices that my younger self has made for me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
suddenly I have this expansion and appreciation for myself for what I've done to get me here, and I know how hard it was because it was me. And so
Wow.
it's a mind-blowing process, and I just love that to express it to somebody else or even to oneself.
I think that's a very powerful exercise. What I think is amazing, there's all these incredible tools out there to, and they don't take a long time. But when you have the discipline or the focus, or you make the space to prioritize those activities, it can really dramatically shift your whole life. It's what do they say? Like small shifts, you just change your life just 1 degree, and you follow that out over years, it's this amazing upward trajectory. And it can happen in the reverse too. That's why I think these are so important. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, well, so what about parents? Because what's some advice that you can give to parents of teens that are specifics that they can do to give opportunities or encourage their teenage children?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and again, I'm very blessed to be the person. I get to coach a lot of young people. I also know a lot of parents, so like I get to kind of live in both worlds, and I see both sides of when a young person's like, "Oh my gosh, my mom and I had this great conversation last week, and she was telling me about some of these things. It was a little awkward, but I'm really glad that we had this really deep dive." And I heard the mom story. Oh my gosh, I tried to talk about this subject. My daughter was rolling her eyes the whole time. It was super awkward. And to hear those different perspectives where the mom's like, oh, why did we even have the conversation? And the daughter is like, oh, yeah, it was really meaningful. Now, young people, especially adolescents, are in a space where they're trying to assert their independence. They're trying to start to show that they can live on their own. It's kind of this concept of, shifting from adolescence to adulthood. So they're not going to necessarily tell mom and dad, hey, I'm really glad you brought up this awkward conversation. This was great. But they may tell someone else that. And even if they act like they're not listening, they are listening. In fact, there was one researcher, and this isn't to insult adolescents, it's just to say that it's a really formative time of development. This researcher said, look, based on the research that I've done, adolescents need their parents just as much as babies do, but it's in a different way. Little baby is more about raising that, little human being so that they can be fed and they can be nurtured. Adolescents need a lot of support in processing things and evaluating things and self-reflection and emotional regulation. And so really understanding that even if it's difficult or awkward, those conversations really matter. And taking the time to say, hey, I noticed this is what I'm observing about what's going on. You seem really kind of disconnected, really upset. Let's have a conversation about what's going on. I want to understand more. And just asking questions instead of telling solutions is a really helpful way for young people to think through things. So that would be first thing. I would say, one, it's okay to have awkward conversations. They are listening even if they act like they're not. Two, more is caught than taught. What do I mean by that? Young people are sponges. They are constantly watching you as a parent or you as a mentor or advisor for your behavior. So more than what you say, what you do matters. And I say, if you want your young person to eventually find their own special someone and be treated with respect, make sure if you're in a married, in a relationship, that you treat your partner with respect. Like, you're modeling what you want your young people to do and how you want your young people to basically live their own life. So if you want your young people, your children, to be trustworthy and have integrity, guess what? Act with integrity. If you want them to treat others with kindness and respect, guess what? Treat others with kindness and respect. If you want them to love themselves and treat themselves with kindness and grace, guess what? Treat yourself with kindness and grace. So it's not an easy one, but it's super important. And then I would say the third thing, and having coached young people, had so many conversations, lived in the world of teenagers for so many years. The third thing I would say is recognize that every time you give your teenager a compliment, you're programming their brain on what matters. And so the reason I say this, and very well-intentioned, amazing parents will say, hey, oh my gosh, you got straight A's. That's so awesome. You're so smart. Or, oh my gosh, you got, an A++. That's great. Or you got an A on this. You did the perfect goal. Those compliments are okay. Those are performance-based compliments. That is okay. But if a young person only hears performance-based compliments, what we're teaching them is the only thing that matters is their performance as opposed to their character. So if a young person's a star athlete, I would actually recommend that they hear more compliments about how they played the game. Hey, you know what, Emily, I loved how you passed that soccer ball to Jessica and how you really equipped her to set up that goal. So things that are about character, kindness, gratitude, teamwork, the skills that are actually more important than just a perfect score, emphasizing, acknowledging, rewarding those things are actually training this very malleable adolescent brain on what matters. Teenagers are attuned to rewards and recognition. What we reward and recognize during the teen years becomes what their adult brain is focused on. And so I see so many human doings, perfectionists trying to achieve, get performance, but it's because I believe in part they didn't get the recognition for their internal work of who they were becoming as a person of worth because of who they are, as opposed to what they were doing.
Ooh, those are three amazing tips, somewhat related to the last one about giving compliments based on character or the effort or the work rather than the achievement itself, because their value does not lie in the achievement, but it lies in their character. I love that so much. And sometimes that one's a hard one for me to execute as much as I try. I
It's hard. It's counterintuitive, right? I'm not saying you can't celebrate straight A's. That's wonderful. But as someone, and again, I love my parents. They did the absolute best they could. They are amazing. But there's a lot that they didn't know, like many of us. And so I was constantly recognized just for my performance, my straight A's, my perfect scores. And so that really, I had to unlearn a lot of that because life isn't about perfect scores. Sometimes life is about trying new things and failing and learning from that mistake. It's not about straight A's, it's about your best effort and how you grow. So I think if you really want, if our listeners or our parents, based on what I've learned in 25 years of living in the team world, of being a team coach and working with girls, really recognize the whole person. So if you're gonna recognize our performance, great. But you know what? Add some character-based compliments in there too.
I love that. And you mentioned failure. So, how do you coach or teach parents or kids about failure, their relationship with failure or mistakes?
Yeah, it's very simple. I tell our young people, and I'm really actually it's more about them experiencing it, but it's about there's no such thing as failure if you try something and you learn from it. Failure only exists if you've tried something and you don't have self-reflection. If you tried something and it doesn't make you better. So there actually is no such thing as failure. And that's not being Pollyanna. I mean, things if we think about inventors or people who are creating new things, people mess up all the time, but they accept that these failures are not roadblocks, that they're stepping stones that are going to allow them to get a better idea, a better iteration. So this idea of redefining failure, that making mistakes, normalizing mistakes. I actually love Dr. Carol Dweck and her work out of Stanford. In one of our courses, we actually give the students the grade not yet if their performance wasn't at the level that the teacher thought. So rather than just give, a grade that's low, to say, hey, I know your capacity and your potential. You're not where you need to be yet. Here's my feedback. I'd like you to iterate. I'd like you to do this again, and this time integrate my feedback. Research actually shows that young people will learn a lot more from feedback that they can then implement right away and then get a grade later than if you just give them a lower grade and say, hey, do better next time.
Oh, I like that feedback. Thank you. Well, I have a question for you personally. Do you have any daily rituals or practices that you do, like morning rituals that kind of keep you on that path?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of an amazing researcher,
Oh, Andrew
neuroscientist, and
Huberman. Yeah.
he's researched really the leading edge best practices
Yeah.
for basically protocols. And he's got even a new book coming out, new protocols. But I'm not even promoting his book for him. It's because I believe in his work so much. So I'm sharing some of my practices. And the reason I mention him is because his research-based protocols have really helped me. I used to be a person that was really driven by just performance. And I would get up, I'd skip breakfast, I'd go right to my laptop and I'd start working. I don't advocate that. That leads to burnout and lack of productivity over time. What I learned from doing it the wrong way is how to do it the right way. So what I actually do is, for me, the mornings really matter, and I actually devote the first hour of my morning to actually taking care of myself, taking care of my dogs. I get up, I will do some, I'll pray. Actually, I read the Bible because it's part of my faith, and then I'll walk my dogs. I come home, I'll get some green tea, and then I'll write out, actually review my goals for the day. Then I'll take them out for a walk. I'll get some sunshine in my eyes so that it wakes up my system. And then I try to work out 3 to 5 times a week before I start my regular work. So I prioritize taking care of myself first. Now, I'm not always perfect at this, but I'm working on it. And it's made a huge difference. I get so much more done if I prioritize taking care of really, my physical self and emotional self first.
And do you notice, I love Andrew Huberman, and I've implemented so many of his things, all the way to I have a cold plunge in my basement,
There you
and
go.
just
So
the
you
light
totally,
exposure and just all of the things. But what
yeah,
I've noticed in my life is when I implement some of those things in my daily practices is even if I'm waking much earlier to begin my day, that actually gives me additional energy to show up better for the rest of the day.
yeah.
And the energy that if I'm talking about just physical energy to be able to act and do the task, that's one thing, but also the energy that I'm emitting
Mhm.
to the people around me. I believe that I show up with a better energy that they can feel, and I want to show up like that with people that I know. And I know when I'm high frequency or low frequency, or when someone else is. So So I believe that an investment in self does that. And so I'm always curious what people's daily rituals are.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it sometimes would feel selfish, like, "Oh, I'm not just jumping into work right away." I had to do a lot of deprogramming from the hustle culture, like sleep when you die, all of that. I was all sold out for that for a while because I am very passionate about my work. But what I learned is that if I wanted to bring my best self to my day, my best self to helping those young people, and this is applicable for parents too, we actually do need to take personal ownership and responsibility for our energy management. The energy that we manage and how we are able to show up for others has a dramatic impact, as you know, on everyone around us. It's science. We have mirror neurons. We literally catch attitudes and mindsets and feelings. And so if we want to bring out our best in those around us, and that includes parents with the kiddos, gotta really invest in yourself. And it's not selfish, it's actually one of the most loving things you can do.
Well, I am so happy we got to share some time with you today. You've given so much wonderful advice, tips to parents and kids. My wife, my kids are going to love this advice, and I hope everybody that's listened has enjoyed that. Before we go, do you have one tip for all of us that we can improve our day today?
That is such a great question. And for me, I've worked a lot on work-life balance because I love my work and I love serving and I love helping kids. And I realize I also have the rest of my life. I have my husband, I have, spending time with family and friends and taking care of myself. And one of the best pieces of advice that I learned, and I don't even know where I learned it, but it was a really powerful idea, is that you want every day, every individual day to be a reflection of the life that you want to live. And what that means is if you care about your family, making that priority as part of that day. If you care about and you love your spouse, which hopefully you do, or your partner, make sure that you spend time, intentional time, and don't just aspire, make it an important part of the day. If you care about fitness and wellness, make that part of your day. So if every day, or you try to make sure that every day reflects all of those things that you care about, that reflects ultimately the life you want to lead, you'll make sure that you're not missing out on the priorities that matter most.
Great, wonderful advice. I'm going to go prioritize my family today, and and it's going to be a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, Julie, for your time. You're amazing. Thank you for the inspiration you give to so many people. And I will put how people can find you and anything that you can share with them in the comments here. Julie, I hope you have an amazing day and an amazing life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Randy. Really, this is such an amazing outreach that you're doing. And I am grateful for you and the thoughtfulness and the intentionality that you put into creating learning experiences for your listeners and those who are watching, because I can imagine that their lives are going to be better because of it.
Thank you. I receive your compliment. And everybody, we will see you next time.